Dinero, money, felicidad, happiness. Dinero, money, felicidad, happiness. So whatever language you use, money and happiness are two of those things that come into our mind most often for people every day. Every day. Money has had so many things said about it that were untrue and false, and happiness has also had so many things said about it that were untrue and false. No one can form our opinions about either money or happiness, but our own self. Each person has their own values that they put on these things that are a big part of our life. Money is a big part of our life. Even Jesus tells us in the Lord's Prayer, the key to life, you give us this day our daily bread, and that bread symbolizes the fullness of life. That bread symbolizes having our every good desire fulfilled, but so many of our good desires cannot be fulfilled without money. So we don't worship money, but we know that money is God in action. It brings us into that divine circulation, and as we realize that we're putting it into divine circulation, then happiness follows. Happiness follows. So money and happiness. In his 1910 classic, The Science of Getting Rich, the great Wallace D. Wattles made this bold statement. Now remember, this is 1910. The poor do not need charity, they need inspiration. Charity only sends them a loaf of bread to keep them alive in their wretchedness, or gives them an entertainment to make them forget for an hour or two, but inspiration will cause them to rise out of their misery. If you want to help the poor, demonstrate to them that they can become rich. Prove it by getting rich yourself. That's from Wallace D. Wattles from his 1910 classic, The Science of Getting Rich. Now, to the surface mind, this may seem harsh or cold-hearted, but I believe Mr. Wattles meant it to be just the opposite. He is speaking to the development of consciousness. The person who relies on charity or the kindness of others is surely to habituate a weakness in their consciousness that will perpetuate dependency in their lives. This is especially important, I believe, when it comes to children, for charity imposes upon their minds a sense of helplessness and the beginning of the development of a poverty consciousness. And by charity, Mr. Wattles and I both mean the giving of something to someone without an expectation of any effort or action on their part other than to accept that which is given to them. Now, none of us would want to give to an unworthy causes or to people who use what we give to abuse themselves or to abuse others. Mr. Wattles also wrote, do not spend time in charitable work or charity movements. All charity only tends to perpetuate the wretchedness it aims to eradicate. And this we can see in the world today just as he saw it in 1910. Charities have expanded dramatically in our world, and in many cases, instead of promoting even a sense of gratitude, it has fostered a sense of false entitlement. There are ways to help people without diminishing their consciousness or inherent dignity. An excellent example is Goodwill Industries, which was founded in 1902 in Boston by Reverend Edgar J. Helms, a Methodist minister and early social innovator. Helms collected used household goods and clothing in wealthier areas of the city, then trained and hired those who were poor to mend and repair the used goods. The goods were then resold or were given to the people who repaired them. The system worked, and the goodwill philosophy of a hand up, not a handout, was born. It is this hand-up philosophy that has inspired countless numbers of people to rise above their circumstances into something greater. Organizations that provide education or health care follow this hand-up philosophy. So we know that each and every one of us have opportunities where we can give, but we must make sure that those what we're giving to is a worthy cause, that it doesn't just give somebody something that they can easily forget, but gives them something that gives them a hand up into empowering them to have a better life, a more wonderful life. Dr. Robert Bitzer, who founded the Hollywood Church, stressed to his congregation that giving to a church was not a charitable contribution, as a church is a nonprofit, not a charity. His church was paid for, including the remodeling and additions, within 8 years, and when he passed from this life, his church was one of the most prosperous of all churches in Hollywood. The word charity carries with it an atmosphere, he tells us, of diminished good and the inability to be self-reliant, both which contradict the teaching of the mastermind Jesus. The person who gives with the thought of charity may feel a boost to their own ego, but there is no principle involved that increases the permanency of good for both the giver and the receiver. Now, money and wealth have been falsely identified by religious dogma as something far different than that which was stated in the ancient wisdom, including the Gospels. The mastermind Jesus gave us the principle of prosperity in his parable of the talents, and the mystics before him gave us their insight into the value of prosperity thinking. Jesus tells us in the parable of the talents that he who has much will have even greater still, but he who has less, those who go around, poor-mouthing and talking about what they don't have, will have even less, and may even lose that which they have. So he's telling us that we must be cautious about what we accept in our mind is true for us, because if we accept in our mind that we don't have anything, and we have nothing to be grateful for, then we're going to find ourselves with nothing to be grateful for. In the book of Ecclesiastes 10:19 through 20, we can read, "A feast is made for laughter, wine makes life merry, and money is the answer for everything. Do not revile the king, even in your thoughts, or curse the rich in your bedroom, because a bird in the sky may carry your words, and a bird on the wing may report what you say." Now, King Solomon, who is considered to be the author of Ecclesiastes, is telling us to not only see money as something good to be enjoyed and necessary, but also tells us not to talk against wealth and prestige or position. This is the teaching of consciousness, for what we accept in consciousness manifests in our experience, whether we believe it about ourselves or someone else. There are people who live their entire lives believing that other people have money and they don't, and so they don't. A prosperity consciousness is not inherited. We can see that. And so many times we see children of wealthy people who end up in all kinds of problem situations and all kinds of grief to their parents because they didn't inherit the consciousness, they only inherited the money. Consciousness is developed through thought and belief and action. And we can control all three of these with the power of our mind, Now, King Solomon is telling us that a feast is made for laughter, but we won't have the feast without the money. Wine makes life merry, and we can't buy the wine without money. And so he tells us money is the answer for everything. In other words, we must realize, just as Jesus told us, he said, "I have come to tell you that you may have life and you may have it more abundantly," that God, infinite spirit, infinite intelligence, infinite power, has created an abundance of every good thing in the universe in which we live, and it's up to us to learn how to accept it, And King Solomon is telling us, don't talk against money and don't talk against the rich. Don't make wealth a negative in your mind, because if you do, then all kinds of things can befall you that take away your good and put you into a financial struggle. So let us bring into our mind that money and happiness go hand in hand. Two sides of the same coin, so to speak. We have all heard the expression, money doesn't buy happiness. Well, we know that poverty doesn't either, and let us keep this straight in our mind every day in all things that concern us. So dinero, money, felicidad, happiness, in every language, let's see money and happiness as ours. Let's see it as ours. Let's don't see it as separate and apart from us. So each and every one of us can learn from those words from the book of Ecclesiastes, and we can learn from those words from the great Wallace D. Waddell. Do not put charity into our mind. If we give to someone, give to them knowing that whatever it is that we give is helping them, giving them a hand up so that they can go forth and be empowered to realize that they can become self-reliant self-reliance is the key to realizing our oneness with God, our oneness with the power, the spirit, and the intelligence of the infinite. Because if we realize that power, that spirit, and that intelligence, and we use our mind to recognize it and identify it not only around us but within us, within our own mind, heart, and soul, then we can find that abundant life, that happy life, that joyful life, that healthy life, that successful life that is ours to experience. God didn't put us here to grovel through this universe. God didn't put us here to struggle. God didn't put us here on our knees. God put us here in God's own image and likeness. Own image and likeness. And that image and likeness is intelligence and power and spirit. We all have intelligence. So we can draw more intelligence from the infinite as we use the intelligence that we have. We all have power. We all have the power of faith to draw to us things that we believe to be true for us, and we can draw even more power from the infinite as we use the power that we have. We all are in the spirit. Spirit is mind. It's the invisible. We all know that we're alive, so the spirit is alive. We know that life is God, so we know that we're part of life, so therefore we're part of God. So we know that as we stir up the spirit within us, recognize and identify that there's a power that we can use that's greater than we are, that we can draw from it, and we can use all the intelligence that's necessary for us to find the solution to every problem, to find the idea that will heal us, prosper us, and bless us, then we know that we're in tune with the infinite good, and as we become in tune with the infinite good, that good and more good begins to show up in our life. It shows up in our life. Just as Jesus tells us, it is the Father that doeth the work. I of mine own self can do nothing, but that which I am to do is to have faith. Is to have faith and to believe that I have what's necessary, the intelligence, the power, and the spirit, the life that's necessary to realize the better life, the good life, the joyful life, and the abundant life. So let's look at those words again from Ecclesiastes 10:19 through 20. This is from the ancient wisdom in the Torah and the Holy Bible, the Old Testament. A feast is made for laughter, wine makes life merry, and money is the answer for everything. Feast is made for laughter, wine makes merry, and money is the answer for everything. So he's telling us as we learn to accept our good, as we learn to accept that God has created everything necessary and freely gives to us, just as Jesus said, it's the Father's good pleasure to give to you. So we recognize that Father that Jesus referred to as Spirit. He said the Father is Spirit, not a spirit, but Spirit omnipresent, Spirit omnipotent, Spirit omniscient, all presence, all power, all intelligence. So we know that as we keep faith with this principle of intelligence and power and spirit, that we shall draw into our mind, our heart, and our soul all things necessary for us to realize that we can draw to us all the good that's going to bring forth a greater happiness in our life, a greater happiness in our life. Life is to be enjoyed. Life is to be enjoyed. I believe that if God has a will for us, that will is that we live this life, that God has given us this opportunity, clothed our spirit in human form, and given us this opportunity to enjoy all the good things that life has to offer. You know, so many people separate the material from the spiritual, but it's all God, all the time. Everything that we have was an idea in mind first before it became something in the physical. The very shirt or blouse that you're wearing, the very suit or the dress that you're wearing, was an idea in mind before it became into visible material reality. So we know that everything begins in mind. So as we begin to recognize in mind and identify in mind that there's a greater good for each and every one of us, that God has created an abundance of every good thing, then we can realize that we too can have it. We dwell in the midst of infinite abundance. The abundance of God is our infinite source. Think about those words. We dwell in the midst of infinite abundance. The abundance of God is our infinite source. So we think about that and we start clearing our mind of all the noise and the nonsense of the world, all the things, from the naysayers that want to tell us that life is hard, that life is a struggle, that somehow we can't escape the struggle, and we start putting into our mind that something greater, that greater idea, that greater impulse to recognize and realize the good, then we shall see the good show up with grace and ease, with grace and ease. Let's look at these words from the American Mystic Ernest Holmes. This is an affirmation. It's a very lengthy affirmation, so it's meant to put these thoughts into our mind and to let our mind shift towards the good in a greater way. So if you can take the time, sit and be still, and just let these words move through your mind. I'm going to read them in the first person in the way in which they were written. But remember, every time you hear that word I or I am, take that into your mind and say, this is the truth for me. So we can read, my knowledge that the great I am is ever available gives me an increasing capacity to draw upon it and to become inwardly aware of the presence of the Spirit. Through the quiet contemplation of the omni-action of Spirit, I learn to look quietly and calmly upon every false condition, seeing through it to the other side of the invisible reality, which molds, conditions, and recreates all of my affairs after a more nearly divine pattern. With a penetrating spiritual vision, I can dissipate the obstruction, remove the obstacle, and dissolve the wrong condition. Standing still, I can watch the sure salvation of the law of God. I now claim health instead of sickness, wealth instead of poverty, happiness instead of misery. Every thought of fear or limitation is removed from my consciousness. I know that my word transmutes every energy into constructive action, producing health and harmony, happiness and success. I know that there is something at the center of my being which is absolutely certain of itself. It has complete assurance, and it gives me complete assurance that all is well. I maintain my position as a divine being here and now. I know that in this consciousness of reality is a supply for my every need, physical, mental, or spiritual, and I accept that supply in deepest gratitude. I am thankful that this is the way life fulfills my needs through the doorway of my inner self, and I am thankful that I know how to use this perfect law of God. I come to this great fountain of supply in the very center of my being to absorb that for which I have needs mentally and physically, and I am filled with the sense of the reality of that which I desire. As I am filled with reality, I permit it to flow into my world of thought and action, knowing that it brings peace, harmony, and order all around me. There arises within me limitless faith in the unconquerable presence of God, the perfect law of God, and divine right action. And so it is, amen. And so it is, amen. So let's just think about those words and let them gel into our mind. And let us bring our mind to our mind that money and happiness go hand in hand, two sides of the same coin, so to speak. We have all heard that expression. I want to repeat this, that money doesn't buy happiness. Reject that idea, because poverty doesn't either. And let us keep this straight in our mind every day in all things that concern us. So we know that dinero, money, felicidad, happiness, and whatever language we speak or whatever language we can take that into our mind, we know that happiness and money are two sides of the same coin. And so we allow ourselves to realize that more and more good, that greater good, that more abundant good is available to us, and that we're going to realize it and we're going to have it in our life